Sofia, 1891. A painting arrives at the royal palace, a gift the prince purchased himself in Munich. The cabinet ministers enter the room for their morning briefing. They stop. One by one, they raise their hands and make the sign of the cross. Not once. Every single time they see it. This had nothing to do with art criticism. This was spiritual defense. The painting showed a figure seated in darkness, muscular, brooding, beautiful. Wings folded behind him, eyes glowing green, staring directly out of the canvas with an intensity that felt less like art and more like eye contact. Franz von Stuck called it Lucifer. The Bulgarian court called it something else, a spiritual threat so potent it required continuous ritual neutralization. What makes a painting so terrifying that government officials, men running a modernizing European nation, felt compelled to protect their souls from it every time they walked past? The answer lies in what Stuck painted and in the collision between two incompatible worlds: the psychological ambitions of German symbolism and the cosmic certainty of Orthodox Christianity. Prince Ferdinand of Bulgaria was not Bulgarian. Selected in 1887 from the German Saxe-Coburg-Gotha dynasty, Ferdinand understood his position required more than political maneuvering. The newly autonomous Principality of Bulgaria, freshly separated from Ottoman rule, needed international legitimacy. Ferdinand needed to project sophistication. He treated art collecting as statecraft. French paintings, German sculpture, Austrian prints, English portraiture. Each acquisition announced the same message: Bulgaria was not a provincial Balkan backwater. Sofia was a modern European capital. In 1891, Ferdinand traveled to Munich and purchased Lucifer directly from Stuck's studio. The canvas measured 161 by 152.5 centimeters, monumental, impossible to ignore. He installed it in the royal palace where his ministers would see it daily. The choice was deliberate. Stuck had won a gold medal 2 years earlier for The Guardian of Paradise. He co-founded the Munich Secession in 1892, championing rebellion against academic conservatism. His work merged mythology, mysticism, and sexuality into canvases that bypassed intellect and triggered visceral response. Lucifer belonged to what critics called Stuck's dark monumental period, works exploring original sin, moral ambiguity, the underworld. Contemporary reviews praised his cachet of strangeness, which comes from a modern treatment of legendary, biblical, mystic, or symbolic subjects. For Ferdinand, this was exactly the point: modern, European, provocative. He did not anticipate terror. Traditional devils had horns, cloven hooves, tails, grotesque faces designed to repel. Stuck's Lucifer had none of these. Contemporary critics called the figure a man-demon, a grim-faced man with black wings and luminous yellow eyes. But man is the critical word here. Apart from the wings, the figure appeared entirely human. Ordinary. This ordinariness was the source of its power. The symbolist movement, which Stuck helped define, rejected external explanations for evil. They argued humanity required no supernatural source of corruption. People carried it within themselves, activated through pride, loss, ambition, rage. By depicting evil as human, Stuck removed the comfortable distance between viewer and subject. The devil wasn't a foreign entity invading from outside. The devil was what you could become. Worse, Stuck rendered this humanized demon with a muscular, almost heroic form. Classical beauty housing spiritual malice. The painting suggested that corruption could inhabit perfection, that aesthetic sublimity and moral darkness were not opposites but terrifying companions. The composition reinforced this psychological assault. Lucifer sits alone against endless, undefined darkness. His left hand supports his head in a posture directly borrowed from Rodin's The Thinker, transforming the devil from chaotic beast into contemplative strategist. His right arm twists backward, fingers touching the wing he lost when he fell from grace. The gesture is subtle, devastating. It suggests awareness of what he sacrificed. Eternal regret fused with eternal plotting. The darkness surrounding him eliminates all environmental context. No hell, no heaven, no reference points, just the figure and the viewer locked in confrontation. Then, there are the eyes, piercing, glowing green or luminous yellow depending on the light. They stare out from under a slightly bowed head with an intensity that carries the weight of rebellion, exile, and unending vengeance. Behind the figure, a faint crescent of fluorescent light. Some interpret it as distant heaven, forever out of reach. Others see Venus, the morning star, Lucifer's original name before the fall. Two phosphorus blue rays on the left, a spark of hope still flickering in an otherwise dreary hell. The technical execution was flawless, dramatic chiaroscuro, cold light against oppressive shadow. Every formal choice amplified the psychological pressure. When Stuck heard about the Bulgarian ministers making the sign of the cross, he was delighted. This was symbolist success, art that bypassed intellectual engagement and triggered raw spiritual confrontation. The painting had become a weapon. The Bulgarian ministers were not art critics. They were Orthodox Christians governing a nation where faith and state remained inseparable. Their reaction, making the sign of the cross, signaled spiritual defense. In Orthodox tradition, images function differently than in Western secular culture. An icon is not merely illustration, it is a gateway, establishing a real and transformative connection to the spiritual reality it depicts. The Greek etymology makes this explicit. Symbolos means unity, connection. Its opposite is diabolos, devil, separation, division. For the ministers, encountering an image of the devil was a charged spiritual event. It was a direct confrontation with the spiritual principle of separation from God. This perception immediately elevated the stakes from taste to peril. Traditional iconography governed how sacred subjects could be depicted. Rules existed to ensure spiritual safety. Devils appeared as clearly defeated monsters, grotesque and contained within moral frameworks that affirmed God's ultimate victory. Stuck's Lucifer violated every rule. The figure was beautiful, contemplative, sensual, a strong, semi-naked man depicted with aesthetic reverence typically reserved for saints or classical heroes. The painting coupled male nudity with the image of the ultimate tempter, translating abstract evil into immediate bodily temptation. The intelligence radiating from those glowing eyes made the threat worse. Ministers were prepared for a devil who was clearly defeated. Stuck presented a genius eternally plotting revenge. This sophisticated, relatable enemy fundamentally challenged a belief system predicated on clearly defined moral warfare. The political position of the ministers made their exposure particularly fraught. They represented the internal structure of the new Bulgarian state. They needed to project modernity while preserving national religious identity. Ferdinand's acquisition created an impossible paradox. Criticize the prince's Western art and appear politically backward, or ignore the spiritual threat and risk damnation. Their ritualistic self-defense became the only mechanism for reconciling political duty with spiritual imperative. The sign of the cross in Orthodox practice is a powerful invocation of Christ's victory over death and evil. It sanctifies the individual and serves as an active spiritual barrier. The necessity of repeating this defense every single time they encountered the painting suggests they perceived the threat as constantly renewable, physically present. The painting became, in effect, a cursed artwork requiring continuous ritual neutralization. Ferdinand could acquire the material symbols of Western modernity with ease. He could not secularize the profound spiritual sensibilities of his government with equal speed. The story of Lucifer and Sophia captures the tension inherent in modernity itself. The attempt to adopt secular Western culture while preserving traditional spiritual identity. Ferdinand viewed the painting as cultural legitimacy. His ministers viewed it as spiritual danger. Both were correct. The German symbolist movement represented a fundamental shift in how art engaged with morality. Rather than depicting evil as external and defeatable, symbolists explored it as internal and permanent, woven into human psychology through pride, desire, ambition. This approach aligned with emerging psychoanalytic thought. Freud published The Interpretation of Dreams in 1899, less than a decade after Lucifer's arrival in Sophia. Both movements suggested that darkness resided not in external demons, but in the human psyche itself. For Western secular audiences, This psychological framework offered intellectual sophistication. For Orthodox Christians, it offered heresy. The doctrine of theosis, humanity's journey toward union with God, depended on clear moral categories. Evil existed outside the soul, to be resisted through faith and sacrament. Suggesting evil was intrinsic to humanity undermined the entire theological architecture. Stuck's painting depicted the devil and hinted at a mirror. It suggested the devil was a mirror. The melancholy radiating from the figure made this worse. The glowing eyes symbolized loss and envy, emotions fundamentally human. The posture suggested tragic awareness of consequences. The painting invited empathy for the fallen angel. This empathy was precisely what made it spiritually dangerous. Traditional iconography maintained emotional distance. The viewer looked at the devil from a position of spiritual safety, affirmed by the presence of saints or Christ's triumph. Stuck eliminated that safety. The endless darkness surrounding Lucifer created a spiritual vacuum. No heaven visible, no redemption offered, just the figure in his eternal exile, and you, the viewer, standing there meeting his gaze. The minister's fear stemmed from recognition. They recognized their own capacity for pride rather than an external devil. The painting made damnation feel psychologically plausible rather than cosmically distant. Ferdinand kept the painting on display. His ministers kept making the sign of the cross. The ritual became tradition, a daily acknowledgement that the court existed in profound contradiction. The prince demanded cultural modernity. The faith demanded spiritual vigilance. Neither could fully yield. Franz von Stuck died in 1928, celebrated as a master of German symbolism. Lucifer became one of his most famous works, reproduced and analyzed as a masterpiece of psychological portraiture. The painting now resides in the National Gallery for Foreign Art in Sofia, no longer in the royal palace but still in Bulgaria. Visitors stand before it and see different things. Art historians see compositional brilliance, symbolist innovation, the successful fusion of mythological subject matter with psychological depth. Religious viewers see something else. The power of Lucifer lies in its refusal to provide comfortable distance. Stuck portrayed a man instead of a monster. He painted a man who made a choice and lives eternally with the consequences. Beautiful, intelligent, damned. The Bulgarian ministers understood this instinctively in 1891. Their ritual wasn't superstition. It was recognition that some images embody the ideas they depict. The painting remains what it always was, a confrontation. It frames a contest between competing visions of evil rather than a clash of external forces. The secular psychological model that sees darkness as intrinsic to human nature. The theological model that sees it as separation from God. Both frameworks exist simultaneously in the modern world, often within the same person. Standing before Lucifer, you choose which framework to inhabit. The symbolist viewer sees reflected human psychology. The orthodox viewer sees spiritual warfare requiring defense. The painting doesn't resolve this tension. It crystallizes it. Ferdinand wanted sophistication. His ministers wanted salvation. Stuck delivered a masterpiece that satisfied neither desire while validating both fears. The canvas still glows with those luminous eyes, still radiates that melancholic intelligence, still poses the question it posed in 1891. Is the devil something that tempts you from outside, or something that looks back at you from within? Your answer determines whether you see art or whether you reach for the sign of the cross.